In part two of this mini series, I'm going to go through planning a cover letter. Now, as I've already mentioned in part one, if you have no aspirations to work in football or to become an S&C coach, fair enough. Stay with me though, you are going to learn the generic skills on how to plan a cover letter, regardless of what you're into. So as you can see, this is the job at Motherwell Football Club, working as an assistant strength and conditioning coach. Now, if I was to plan my cover letter for this job, I'd open up the advert. I'd also get a pen and paper as well, because I'm going to take some notes based on the advert and what I'm going to put into my cover letter. Really, really important though, check how long the letter should be. You can see here it's got to be 1 page. If there is no clear kind of statement on what they want, 1.5 pages. Don't go any more than 2, it starts to get too long. But this is very clear here, 1 page. Okay, there's not much to work with, but let's see what we can do. So going back to the planning, open the advert up, have your pen and paper, and just go through the areas highlighted that you think should go in the letter. So for me, going through this, the first bit I see that I feel I should talk about is that second paragraph there. It's expected a successful candidate will assist with, and you can see what I've highlighted there. So training load management, fitness testing, rehab, nutrition recovery, different aspects of sports science and S&C is what they want there. So I'm going to make sure that goes into my notes. That's really obvious. That's a big part of the day-to-day job. I need to make sure my letter speaks about that. I keep going through the letter. Now they want experience of gym and pitch-based support in professional football. It's a mixture though. You can see the second area there I've highlighted, a demonstrable record of developing physical performance in young adult footballers would be an advantage. So it's not just first team, it's academy as well. So I go back to my notes. Experience of gym and field sessions. Well, it's also a bonus if I've got academy experience too. Next part I can see highlighted here is communication skills. Most jobs will have this. Particularly in sport, you're going to have a lot of discussions with different demographics, such as the sports science team, the medical team, coaches, players, different age categories. So I need to be very clear in my letter that I've got experience working within a team and my communication skills are really good. And finally, at the bottom here, they want someone that's flexible. That's a given, it's sport, you're going to be working late nights sometimes, there's weekend work. It's just the norm in sport. So again, I need to be very clear in my letter. I'm happy with that, or maybe content to do that. Happy maybe isn't quite the right word. Qualifications, now I've bypassed the BSc and the MSc. This is just personal preference. I've only got 1 page, so in my head I think, well, I think everyone else is going to have that. They might not have bases or the UKSCA. So let's say I've got that. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to make sure I go to town with that in my letter and really sell the fact that I have that. Experience-wise, they want 2 years working in professional football. Quite simply, I'm going to talk about that. And experience with GPS is desirable, and also a good knowledge of Excel. So once again, go back to my notes. I need to make sure I'm speaking about GPS if I have that experience, and my IT skills which relate to the role. Now this is a very messy list. You might come to that and think, well, how does that turn into a letter? It's just a lot of notes, doesn't really mean anything at the moment. This is where you tidy it up. What I would do personally, everyone's got a different system, so don't take this as gospel, but I would color code it personally. I would go through the bits in sky blue and say, well, that can go in one section, green can go in the next section, red. I'm going to finish off with that stuff in the red. So I'd write to that structure again. If you do it on your laptop, it's quite easy. You can just cut and paste it into different areas. But just make sure when you look at it again, there's a clear, visible order to what you're doing. So you can see here, I've got my intro. As I said in part one, in the intro, you want to make sure you're selling yourself really early. The main points of the job they're looking for in a candidate, I need to put that really early so they're interested in me. They're going to keep reading it. The day-to-day experience of what I've done in the past, how it relates to the job, I put that somewhere in the middle. This is what I've done, this is what I've learned, this is what I can bring to Motherwell Football Club. And then finally, any additional stuff. So some of that desirable category stuff. So the GPS stuff maybe, IT skills. And then some stuff we plan to do in the future, like I mentioned in part one. So if you haven't got bases yet, for example, that accreditation, you can say, well, in the next 6 months, I plan to complete this or that and do whatever. Okay, so there's the list. You're then going to put it into an actual proper format, into Word. So I type up a draft. Remember, it's a draft. Don't try and crack it straight away. I really recommend you get a second reader as well. I've been doing cover letters for about 10 years. I'll always try and get someone else to have a look at it for me and make changes. It might take 2, 3, 4 drafts. That's fine. Take your time. Make sure you do it as best as you can. Don't rush it. And this version on the right, it's not the only way to structure it. The cover letter is the more complex thing to do compared to other aspects such as a CV, which is normally a bit more standardized. But that's the way I would do it. You need to make sure you have some sort of structure. So, this is my way of doing it. It could be a different way, that's fine. But as long as there's a logical story to what you're trying to tell, then you're on the right pathway, basically. So this is what I went through in part one. If you remember the structure I talked about, I've covered most of that in what I've done. You can see I've missed out education, which I've already spoken about. Reason being, there's one page. Now, if you're watching this and you're actually thinking of applying for Motherwell, I'm not saying don't put education in, it's wrong. For me, it's my opinion. I thought, well, I think everyone else is going to have that BSc, MSc, so I'm not going to waste time in one page trying to sell that if everyone else has got that. So what have we learnt today? Firstly, you need to plan your cover letter structure. Really, really important that you do this. Secondly, this is probably the most important of all of them, I'd say. Read through the advert in detail. You have to make sure what you put in your letter mirrors what's being said in the advert. If you don't do that, the employers can get pretty fed up and just skim that letter and move on to one that's a bit more interesting and relevant to what they want. And yeah, it has to revolve around the advert. I'm repeating this so many times because it's so important. What you're saying in that, it has to go back to the bullet points in the advert. You need to talk about what you've done that relates to what they want and what can you bring to that company as well. Okay, so that's the end of part two. In part three, I'm going to go through a full cover letter, I'm going to screen share and just show you the full structure and the smaller details that go into a cover letter. Okay, thank you for listening and I'll see you in part three.